Hi, my name is Scott Huntley, and I'm here to present my findings for my ministry project for my leadership in church and ministry class at Regent University. Going over our introduction, first we'll start off with a focal group identification and then start going on for our purpose, our methodology, our results, a quick analysis, and then finally our conclusion. So for our focal group identification, we're a team-based focus, and what we're going to cover is how does the material covered in the first half of our course on leading with teams apply to the volunteers of my church. So the focal group for my ministry project was the volunteers of my church. My church is Discovery Church, which is in North Las Vegas. And if you'd like to see their website, it is at the link below as well. So the purpose of this is to answer these questions that were pulled from the ministry page for the assignment. And that is, we're going to see if the volunteers of my church consider teams to be an essential part of their ministry, their value for team leadership, as displayed in the groups, the formation of teams encouraged in the church to which the volunteers of my church belong. How would the volunteers rate the unity? Is there true community? And then we'll see some elements as well. In addition, we'll start to incorporate some of our readings, and then how would I rate the effectiveness of the volunteers of my church as a team, and then how might I move them towards a more desirable team environment, and then finally we'll address some other aspects that I think is relevant. So going over our methodology, I used a survey-based approach, which involved 18 questions. The first few considered were part of demographics. And then later on, the questions will dive into actually some of our readings, and we'll approach them as necessary. So for my sample size, we have 28 total volunteers at Discovery Church, and I was able to get out to 22 of them, which made about a 78.5% coverage. So it's a pretty good size, sample size, I believe, for the church for understanding a good idea of what's happening. So first off, I wanted to find out what the age range was for the volunteers at my church. And as you can see, most of them are about the 41 and older, a little bit over half as well, while the other half are actually on the younger side. So we can see hopefully it's a little bit more mature, more adult atmosphere for the volunteers at our church for that. Question number 2, I just simply asked, what is your sex, with being male and female? Many of the behind-the-scenes guys, volunteers at the church are male, which is why it skews. So we have about a 60-40. It was 13 men and then 9 females for the 22. Question 3, I just wanted to ask to see how long they had been at the church, because I wanted to see my purpose behind this was I really wanted to see how long they had invested in the church, and also see how that correlates between some of the other questions for their ministry team, because on some of the future questions we'll start to see how long they've been into teams. And what I wanted to see from this slide is potentially if they had been at groups in prior churches and then continued that trend towards our church. But as we can see, for the vast majority of the volunteers at Discovery Church, we're looking at the 5+ years. To give you an idea, the church has just celebrated a 20-year anniversary this last week, in fact. So many of the volunteers at the church have been around for at least some of that and much longer. But there was at least a couple, around 4 people who had been there for less. So also what's kind of nice is that it's not precluding that you have to be, in the church for a long period of time. They do accept anyone who's willing to be in the church as well for that. Going on to question 4, I asked, are you now or have you ever been on a team for your current church? So this is the idea where I wanted to start to build an idea of who's been on a team and have they. So I had one no recipient, which is where I was wanting to separate them out just in case someone wanted to take the survey, but they had never been on a team. And so that's why I wanted to focus the study specifically on the team building aspect. So I wanted to add in a question so that way I could kind of separate, if you haven't been on a team, then as well as I want your opinion, it was going to be kind of difficult for you to talk about the teams at Discovery Church if you were not on a team. So that was just designed as a weeding out process for that. Question 5, I asked, are you now or have you ever worked on multiple teams before? And so the idea behind this, again, is trying to see potentially if people have moved around. Maybe they found out that their gifts were not misaligned, but maybe they wanted to move from one team to the next. So I also wanted to see potentially the breadth of depth and experience that the volunteers at Discovery Church had. And so again, we see that the vast majority of people have actually been on multiple teams, which shows to me a few things. One is it shows me that people can move, which is always good because I know that some churches can, they put you on a team and then you're just kind of stuck there. So what this shows is that Discovery Church does have some mobility, certainly among the volunteers. So that way, if they feel that they're stuck or they maybe not are realizing their gifts, that they can actually move to a team that might suit their purposes for. And so we did have 3 respondents actually say they weren't on a team, which also means that potentially that they were just one of those who either they really like their team and they wanted to stay on it, or maybe they just haven't been on a single team long enough to be able to find out where they want to go. Question 6, I asked, how long have you worked on a team? And for this, I wanted to add in the time for multiple teams together. So that way, if you had worked on many, many teams over the course of your tenure at a church or even maybe your previous church, that would be added in. And as you can see, again, for the vast majority of the recipients, they had been in at least some team for 5+ years. So what this actually gives is it gives an idea for the experience of not only they've been at the church for a very long time, they've also been on a team for a very long time. This can be good and bad. One is that it could potentially lead to burnout, or you could just see that a lot of people want to be on a team and it's part of their ministry. So I wanted to see how long they've actually been on a team to utilize it. And we kind of see that a few people have been on, just 5 recipients said that they had only been on a team either 1 to 3 years, and then 4 had said they'd been on from 3 to 5. So even though about 60% of the people have been on for 5+ years, that means 40% of people are relatively new to a team. And maybe also I wanted to see how long it was on, so it also can give you an idea when they talk about some of the future questions for unity and kind of how you get acknowledged. We'll see how that kind of plays in to the longevity of how long you've been on a team. So for question 7, this was kind of a very straightforward question. It says, do you consider teams to be an essential part of your personal ministry? And on the survey questionnaire, I did italicize essential and italicize and underline your personal ministry. So I wanted to actually give a specific effect to not only to be essential, but to also be part of your personal ministry. Because I think that one of 2 things can be correct, is that on a large scale, we can understand that groups are essential to a church, because if we don't have a sound team or we don't have a worship team or a greeting team, that the church might suffer. But I wanted to separate out an essential part of the church's ministry to an essential part of their personal ministry. And as we can see, only one person had said indifferent. I wanted to say yes or no, a definitive yes or no, but I also wanted to add in an indifferent category, because potentially maybe if you hadn't been on a team for a long time, I suspected that maybe you haven't actually gotten an opinion yet, because you don't know if you haven't been either a mature Christian long enough or you haven't been on a team long enough to know. But as we see, the overwhelming, over 95% of the respondents said that teams were an essential part of their personal ministry, which actually also goes to show how important part of a team is, not only for the church, but also as part of our Christian walk, and why it's so important that we actually have great team dynamics, because for over 95% of respondents at Discovery Church, it was an essential part of their personal ministry. So it was not only a way that God worked through them, but it was a way they gave back to the church and to the community as a whole. So I think this is a super important question that highlights a lot of instances as to how important team building is to a personal ministry. Question 8, I asked, how is the value for team leadership displayed in the group? And so the way I addressed this is I gave a plethora of selections, and just to note that the aggregate will be more than 22, because I said I select all that apply. So multiple times, many of the selections included verbal affirmation as well as congressional recognition from the congregation. And then you can kind of see only one person said that they had no value from team leadership, which might be an outlier, or it might also highlight something that's a little bit more important to let someone know that they actually don't feel valued from the team. And then I had an other category, just in case I hadn't given all the answers. I wanted to make sure that people were able to give an opinion back. So the other category included a volunteer banquet, personal satisfaction just for serving. So their value was actually intrinsically motivated. It wasn't externally motivated, which is also a great way. And then they had God's desire, which is also, they didn't need external motivation. It was more spiritual motivation for that. But you can see through this overwhelming, it was a verbal affirmation and recognition through the congregation that they had. And that, at least at Discovery Church, they mostly showed that the value was just in talking and personal thanks. And that also goes into the culture and team building. So as we've learned from Peter Scazzero's Emotional Healthy Leader for the culture and team building, the importance of having that because it starts building the unity, the cohesion, and all of that. And we can kind of see from this slide how people see themselves valued in a group, which is just verbal and being recognized in a group setting. So as we see, that is the kind of culture that we're starting to form and starting to see at Discovery Church. Question 9, I asked, how is the formation of teams encouraged in the church? I thought that this was very important because not only is it important to have a team, but it's also, I wanted to see how the teams were formed and people were informed as to how to join. And so I kind of gave what I thought were some of the big ones, which was word of mouth. Hey, we need help on this team or in this ministry. The announcements. So this would be from the pulpit or from the stage where they would say, hey, we need help, versus a bulletin. And then also a membership acknowledgement. So the members themselves would actually say, hey, I'm on a team and I would love you to be on my team with me. So it wasn't just we need help in the children's ministry. It's I'm in the children's ministry and I would like you to be with me. Wouldn't it be great? And then I also wanted to say that it's not or an other. I'm very happy to actually say that there's not a single respondent that say it's not encouraged in the church, which was very positive to feel that none of them felt like they had to have the internal motivation to join a team, but that rather the church itself was coming to them and at least feeling that, hey, we want you on a team, which I thought was very good. But as we see, the two biggest things were word of mouth and the announcements, which means that people themselves are just saying, hey, we need, have you heard? We need help in the sound booth. And then also from the announcements, which is important because most of the announcements are said, at least in Discovery Church, by either the pastor, an assistant pastor, or a respective wife as well. So it's good that everyone that is currently working at Discovery Church was encouraged by either someone in the church or by the leadership staff themselves. So I think that was actually very positive as well. Question 10, I asked, how would you rate your team's unity? So I didn't actually define unity. I just wanted to see how they felt, as their own personal unity. And you can see that a few of them, so about a little three said that they had a 3, so it's a middle of the line. And then one had a 1 or a 2. So the vast majority, however, over 75%, said that they had a 4 or a 5, which shows me that most of them do feel that they have team unity, but about 25% of the respondents say that they don't, they feel either middle of the line or even worse. So that might be something that I would help address with the leadership of the church or a pastor to say, hey, look, most people are happy, but some people feel that they're not all on the same page. So that I think is positive, but it could have some ramifications that we need to adjust on that. Question 11, I just opened and said, do you feel that there's a true community? Again, I did not define what a true community is because I wanted them, most people I think understand what a real community is. And I wanted to also add the true adjective in there because I didn't want people to just say, hey, do you feel like there is a community, but rather a more true type of community, which is also in our purpose what we are looking for in our purpose. And for that, I had a yes, no, or unsure, because again, kind of if you haven't been in the church a long time, or you haven't been in your team a long time, you might not know what a true community is, or you might not know if you're in a true community. So I wanted to add that unsure category. And only one respondent said that they were unsure that there's a true community. And everyone else, again, over 95% of the respondents said that they did feel that they were in a true community, which also shows that at least at Discovery Church, everyone that is volunteering in a group feels part of a true community at Discovery Church. Question 12, I asked, what elements do you see presently at work that contribute to unity? So this is now going back into the unity, which, just to remind, we had about 25% that had a 3 or less, 75% that had a 4 or 5. And again, for multiple selections were permitted. And I went back to the verbal affirmation material gift, but I also added in leadership's skill level. So potentially an element that contributed to unity, or maybe not, was the leader's involvement. And then also member cohesion, because generally we know if you don't like the people you work with or you're volunteering with, you probably don't want to volunteer. And then I also had another category just in case I had missed something. So what we see from here is that no one actually responded with an other, which is fine. And then overwhelmingly, it was verbal affirmation, as well as so leadership skill and member cohesion came out equal. But interestingly enough, not everyone selected them. Some selected leadership skill without member cohesion, and vice versa. So in the end, they kind of came out even. But you see at the top that most people find the unity is not in the material gifts. It's not in what they get. It's actually just in what we found was the values, which should actually kind of correspond, because unity and how I feel valued probably go hand in hand. And so we see that that member cohesion, who we're working with, we like, as well as are we led by someone who's at least competent, who we have faith in, and then also getting that verbal affirmation, the thanks, the praise that we're being on a team as well. Question 13, how opposed to change do you feel your church group is? So what I wanted to address here is kind of the Tom Rainer's autopsy of a deceased church. So I know in his book, he talked a lot about that churches were unwilling to change despite the fact that they were kind of heading into the ground. So I wanted to see if potentially that could be an issue at Discovery Church. It's not going into the ground now, but if the team members and those volunteers who are on our team felt that the church leadership was just unable to change, then we could potentially see a problem in the making if decisions were starting to be made that was causing fractures in the church, or maybe a downward leadership direction. And so I just kind of asked, how opposed or open do you think they are? So 1 was very opposed, 5 was very open. So you kind of see, thankfully, no one said that they were completely closed off, which is always a good thing. And interestingly enough, they also didn't think that only 2 respondents thought they were very open. So most of them, about 80%, did think that they were open, pretty open. And then some of them said, yeah, they might be a little closed. So again, is this a problem now? Not necessarily. Could it potentially be a problem? Because again, so the question is that you might want to dig deeper, which I didn't into the study, is ask, for those 4s and 3s to find out just how open are they? Have you seen them be open? Or is this kind of a question, again, kind of in the autopsy of a deceased church, where they kind of said, everyone thought we were open to change, but we really weren't changing. So we might actually want to address this and take this a little bit deeper if we kind of consider this to be a potential problem. Question 14. So I'm asking the respondents, in their opinion, how open is the leadership to new ideas and ways? Again, this is kind of a rephrasing of the previous question. So I wanted to kind of contrast it to, if you ask a different question, potentially in a different way that's asking the same thing, to contrast each question's response. And here what's really interesting is, again, we have no 1s, which is they're really good, but we actually have more 5s and less 4s. So prior to the previous question, there were very few 5s. Now that number has jumped up to 7. So they actually think that they're not super open to change, but they're very open to new ideas and ways. So I'd kind of, again, this might be a big trigger to start seeing, well, which one is it? Are they very open, or are they not quite so open? And then which ways might they be open to, and kind of dig a little bit deeper, which was outside the scope of the questionnaires, but it's something that we could actually dig a little bit deeper in. So question 15, I said, in your opinion, how would you rate your group or church's utilization of technology? So this is kind of going into Neil Cole's Churches 3.0, upgrades for the future of the church book, where I wanted to see how the church, at least from the volunteer side, thought that they were addressing and adapting to the technological changes of the 21st century. And so you can kind of see the extremes. No one answered on the extremes, which is really good because there's a little bit of there might be a technological gap. So the vast majority of people said that there was 4, and I know that on a few of them they said 2 and 3. So again, what might this say is that we might want to look into this a little bit more to say, okay, where can we improve? Where can we get that to a 5? So right now at Discovery Church, they stream, they utilize a projector with a computer and whatnot. So I think that maybe potentially for all of them, that might be technological. And something that is underlying this that might actually want to be said is we had a lot of 41 and over. So potentially you could see a technological gap between the 41, like the 41 and over, and then kind of the 40 and under, where some of them might not believe that we're really technological, whereas some of the older people, when they see a projector and they see slides and they see streaming, that they think that that's very technological. So this would be something that we potentially want to actually ask a few more questions to figure on the answers to that. So we're going to I want to do an APES transition. So this is actually what I told in the survey, just to give people a frame of reference for the next set of questions. And that is in their book, The Permanent Revolution, Alan Hurst and Tim Catchem discuss the APES model of ministry, citing the Ephesians 4:11 through 12, which is right there. And then I kind of said APES stands for the apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. So I gave the volunteers a frame of reference so that way, because I know a lot of people might not know exactly what we're talking about, so it's good to define our terms on that. So question 16 was, have you ever heard of APES? So after I explained it, I just wanted to know, have you ever heard something? Have you ever heard of it or something akin to it? Because maybe they've heard something that's brushing, but it might not just be that specific model during your time. The interesting thing is that 5 people said they had heard it during their time at the church, and then 17 people said they hadn't, which is really interesting because it means that there might be a disconnect between what the volunteers are thinking that the church stands for or what they don't. So this I think is something that should be dealt with a little bit deeper, because it means that the volunteers who have been there for a very long time, 5+ years for most of them, that some of them have heard some things, some of them haven't. And when you actually look at the younger members, it doesn't account. So you might say, well, maybe the church talked about it a little bit ago. That actually does not account for the large split, because there wasn't 17 members who had not been in the church for 5+ years or like 5 years or less. So this, you can start to see a slight change in the interpretation or what they're gathering from the pulpit. So question 17, I want to say, do you feel the church follows the model or something akin or a different model? So this is where I wanted to say, okay, not only have you heard it, do you feel that the church follows it? And so five people actually said that the church does follow the APES model, and 17 people said that they did not. Now, here was an interesting point to note, that 3 people answered that we are following the APES model, but answered no to having ever heard of the APES model. So it was so I thought that was very enlightening, because they had said, no, I have never heard it. But then once they were introduced to it and asked, do we follow it? They then said, oh yeah, we do follow that. So again, that might be something that we'd want to invest more in, is we might even be implementing the APES model in the church, but we're not actually describing it. So that would be a different way of, I think that we should, from the pulpit, actually be preaching what we are. At least for them, they think that we have it, but they've never heard of it. So that would be something that I would definitely want to address. So question 18, and this was the last one, is that do you feel the APES model would be better suited for the church? And I added the church in quotation marks because I didn't want them to think just Discovery Church, but rather the church as a whole. And then you'll see there. So many people actually did maybe and need more information. So again, if you add up all of those, it'll be more than 22, because I actually found out I had assumed that people would just select one, when actually 4 people said maybe, and I need more information, which from this, 10 people, almost 50% of the respondents actually wanted more information, which is good, because what it's saying is that they want to know that what it's about. And again, that's contrasted to the 17 people who said we don't follow, like they don't know it, they've never heard it, and we don't follow it at our church. So what this also tells me is that we actually have people who are interested, but they just want to know more about it. So this would be a great opener for the APES model to being brought into the church as well. So for analysis, this is going over the purpose slides for the questions that we were answering. So given all the information that we found out, how does it measure up to the questions that we were initially giving? And so do the volunteers in the church believe to be an essential part of their ministry? And the answer is overwhelmingly yes, they do. So is the value for a team displayed, or how is the value for a team leadership displayed in the group? And we found out that it was in verbal affirmations and congregational recognition. And then we say, how is the formation of teams encouraged in the church to which the volunteers of my church belong? And we found it was word of mouth announcements and bulletin, as well as the overwhelmingly for that. Continuing on, we asked, like, how would the volunteers rate their unity? We saw that it kind of had a mix. About 25% had 3 and low below, while about 75% had 4 and 5. So that might be something that we might want to address to see where we could be more unified in that. And then what elements do you see presently at work? Again, it's the elements that we see were the verbal affirmations, leadership ability, and the member cohesion. Those elements really seem to bring people together. Do we have a true community? Overwhelmingly, yes, which is always a very good thing for the volunteers in the church to believe that they are part of true community. Based on our readings, how would I rate the effectiveness of my church, of the volunteers in my church as a team? And I think that there's a little room for improvement. I think that generally saying it's very positive, that most people do feel that they're part of a team, that it's very unified. But I think there is some room for improvement. So we might want to, again, dig a little bit deeper into that cultural and team building analysis from the elements of a healthy leader book on that. So how might I move the volunteers in my church forward? I would focus on what works. That's what I would probably do, is see what works, see what doesn't, and then also be sure to equip leaders with the right skills, because as we saw, overwhelmingly part of the thing that contributed to a leader's unity or a group's unity was the leadership skill. So making sure that they know how to lead their teams the most effective can help build that together. And then the other aspects of team leadership for the project is, again, that APES consistency. So it was very interesting seeing the APES questions to see what people thought the church was, what people didn't think the church was, because underlying all of that is a theology message as to what the church represents and stands for. So I definitely want to start addressing the APES consistency on that. So on my readings, would I rate the effectiveness? Again, overall positive, focus on what works, APES consistency. So for a conclusion, I thought it was a very positive experience. I really gained a lot of insight into my church, into the members of my church. So I really enjoyed it. And then also understanding the health of the church was phenomenal to see, just kind of under the hood, if you will, of the church. I thought it was very good. And then where I would go from here is probably have an open discussion with the pastor, bring him the results, and then try to have a discussion with him, maybe find a new way forward to build in that unity, and then exploring the APES with the church. And then hopefully, potentially, the results of this might help facilitate clearer communication with the pastor, the leadership, and the teams forward. So I just want to thank you for listening. I hope you've learned a lot. Have a nice day.